According to Boris Johnson, leaders of the main industrial nations have pledged 1 billion COVID vaccine pills to poor countries as a huge start towards vaccination the world. The PM claimed countries were rejecting nationalistic attitudes at the end of the G7 summit in Cornwall. He claimed that vaccinating the entire world would demonstrate the value of the G7's democratic beliefs. There was also a promise to eliminate their role in global warming. The world was looking to us to reject some of the selfish, nationalistic approaches that marred the initial global response to the pandemic, and to channel all our diplomatic, economic, and scientific might into defeating COVID for good, Mr. Johnson said after the first meeting of world leaders in 2 years. He said the G7 leaders agreed to provide the vaccines to impoverished nations, including 100 million from the United Kingdom, either directly or through the COVAX program, which is led by the World Health Organization, Gavi, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. End the pandemic and prepare for the future by pushing an enhanced international effort, beginning immediately, to vaccinate the world by distributing as many safe vaccines to as many people as possible as quickly as possible, according to the summit's communiqué. It also includes initiatives to combat climate change, with leaders reaffirming their commitment to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 at the very latest, as well as resolving to phase out most coal-fired power plants. Mr. Johnson dismissed claims that the G7's vaccine pledge was a moral failure because it did not go far enough to meet the requirements of poorer countries. He was referring to the UK's involvement in the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine development. I think people in this country should be extremely proud that 500 million of the 1.5 billion vaccines that have been disseminated throughout the world are as a result of the measures done by the UK government in striking that arrangement with the Oxford scientists and AstraZeneca to distribute it at cost, he said. We're going all out, he said, making vaccinations as quickly as we can and disseminating them as quickly as we can. Mr. Johnson stated that the goal of vaccinating the entire world by the end of next year would be fulfilled, very much because of the efforts of the countries that have come here today. Mr. Johnson also opposed the idea of waiving vaccination patents in order to enhance global supply, which the United States supported last month. He stated that he wants to safeguard innovation incentives while increasing manufacturing capacity, particularly in Africa. In their communiqué, the G7 leaders also promised to prepare for future health disasters, strengthen early warning systems, phase out coal-fired power plants without carbon capture equipment and raise $100 billion £70 billion to assist developing countries in reducing emissions. Support a green revolution that creates jobs, reduces emissions, and aims to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Revitalize their economies through strategies that create jobs, invest in infrastructure, stimulate innovation, support people, and level the playing field so that no place or person is left behind, regardless of age, ethnicity, or gender. Build back better, by establishing a clean, green growth fund for developing country infrastructure development. Respond to China's impact on global trade and call out behaviors that undermine the global economy's fair and transparent operation. Call on China to uphold human rights, particularly in Xinjiang, where violations against Uyghur Muslims have been reported. Increase the number of girls in school by 40 million by 2026. A timely, transparent, expert-led, and science-based WHO-convened study into the origins of COVID-19 is demanded in the message. President Joe Biden has previously stated that the U.S. intelligence community is split on whether the coronavirus was spread through human contact with an infected animal or through a laboratory mishap, a position that China rejects. The advice that we've gotten is that it doesn't look like this particular zoonotic illness came from a lab, Mr. Johnson said, adding, clearly anybody rational would want to have an open mind about that. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said the world community needs to know more about the virus's origins, but that the WHO should look into it. An opportunity that was squandered. We were clear this weekend that action needs to start with us, Mr. Johnson said, noting that the G7 countries responsible for 20% of global carbon emissions. When questioned on the lack of enforceable agreements and timeframes, the Prime Minister says he won't pretend our work is done, and that he'll be on everyone's case to achieve more progress before the COP26 meeting in Scotland later this year. The G7 conference was a historic missed opportunity on COVID-19 and climate change, according to Kirsty McNeil of Crack the Crises, a coalition of charities and NGOs including Save the Children and Oxfam. She claimed that leaders arrived with excellent intentions but no checkbooks. The G7 pledge on vaccines, according to Joanna Ray of UNICEF UK, is the beginning of the action required to end this pandemic. But she called for a rapid acceleration of dose sharing in the next 3 months to ensure millions of vaccines get to the people in the countries that need them the most.